Hello, welcome to the Wire Podcast, a podcast that provides the best content about all things sports. I'm Ryan McCrary, and on today's episode, I'm going to be recapping the 2025 NBA trade deadline. This year's trade deadline was absolutely incredible. There was a ton of activity, a ton of huge trades, and I'd say that it's honestly the best trade deadline I've ever experienced. It was awesome. There were a lot of moves made that we got to talk about. I'm not going to go through every single individual trade, but I do want to go through a lot of them. And there's a lot to talk about because there were a lot of trades made before this year's deadline. We've got a lot to talk about today, so I don't want to go too long here in the intro. And let's go ahead and dive right into today's episode. Alright, let's kick off today's episode in which I will be recapping the 2025 NBA trade deadline. Like I said in the intro, the deadline was unreal this year. It was insane how many moves were made and how many just, mind-blowing trades were made this year. It was incredible. I'm going to go through a lot of them and give my thoughts on these deals. And let's go ahead and dive right in. I think the first deal I want to talk about a little bit. I'm not going to go too deep into this one because I actually already talked about this, I believe, 2 episodes ago, and that is the deal that sent Luka Doncic from the Mavs to the Lakers. This was a 3-team trade. Lakers, they got Luka Doncic, Maxi Kleber, and Markieff Morris. The Mavs received Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 first-round pick, and the Utah Jazz received Jalen Hood-Schifino, a 2025 second-round pick, and actually 2 2025 second-round picks there. Terrible trade for the Mavs. I already gave my thoughts about this trade from their perspective, and how ridiculous I think it is that the Mavs decided to trade Luka, but they did. I think this was an awesome trade for the Lakers, being able to get a player of Luka's caliber at his age, when he's interested in signing an extension, that's insane. That's incredible. There have been some rumors that he may want to test the free agency market, but we'll see when the time comes. This is an incredible trade for the Lakers. Only having to give up Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a first-round pick is huge. Anthony Davis, still a very good player. He's having an excellent season. So I don't want to underrate just how good he is, but he's much older than Luka. I think Luka is significantly better than Anthony Davis, even though Anthony Davis is a very good player in his own right. Luka Doncic is just special, and only having to give up 1 first-round pick in a trade to get Luka is huge. So shout out to the Lakers. Thought this trade was great for them. I hate this for the Mavs. I don't know what their GM Nico Harrison is thinking. But I've already made that very clear, both on this podcast and on my Twitter account. And for the Utah Jazz, this is a very nice trade for them, getting picks without really having to give up anything. That's huge. I read a report that they had to give up cash to both of these teams. I don't know if that's official. I'm looking at each of these trades on NBA.com, and it's not telling me if the Jazz gave up cash in this deal, but they got Jalen Hood-Schifino and 2 second-round picks, which is nice for them. Next up, we've got another huge trade, and that is the Spurs acquiring De'Aaron Fox. This is another 3-team trade. The Spurs received De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin, and the Kings received Zach LaVine, Sidi Sissoko, a 2025 first-round pick via the Hornets, a 2027 first-round pick via the Spurs, a 2031 first-round pick via the Timberwolves, a 2025 second-round pick via the Bulls, a 2028 second-round pick via the Nuggets, and a 2028 second-round pick via the Bulls. And then the Bulls received Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter, Trey Jones, and a 2025 first-round pick via the Spurs. I like this deal for the Spurs. I don't remember how many first-round picks they ended up giving up to get Fox, but I like the fact that they went out, targeted a point guard to pair with Victor Wembanyama. I think that is something that they have desperately needed, and so I like that a lot. And I'm a big fan of Fox's game. At his best, he is a really good offensive player. He's extremely athletic. He's developed into a really good long distance shooter. He's a solid playmaker. I think he is a really good player and should be a nice fit next to Victor Wembanyama. And so I like that aspect of the deal for the Spurs. And for the Kings, I think this was a pretty solid move for them. Losing the Aaron Fox stinks. Like, that's tough. However, they got a ton of draft capital, and they got Zach LaVine, who is having a very solid season this year. Getting all that draft capital is big for them. I think the writing was on the wall for the Kings, and that they weren't going to be a serious contender. And so I like the fact that they were able to get a nice package for their point guard, the Aaron Fox. And I think the return they got is really nice. I thought they did a nice job there. And maybe down the line they can trade Zach LaVine for draft capital and improve the boatload of picks that they have. So I like this move for the Kings. And for the Bulls, I don't really know what all they gave up. It looks like they may have given up 2 second-round picks. They may have given up a first-round pick. I can't really tell based on the way things are laid out on NBA.com. But they get Zach Collins, Kevin Huerter, Trey Jones, and a first-round pick. Seems like a nice return for them. I could be wrong. Maybe they gave up a few more first-round picks, but it seems like this is a good trade for all of the teams involved. The Bulls get a few solid players, guys who have been starters in the NBA. I'm pretty sure Trey Jones has been a starter in the NBA. And then they get a first-round pick. Not a bad return. They didn't give up Zach LaVine, of course. They gave up Zach LaVine. But they get a pick, get some young players. I think for a guy, getting that in return for a guy like Zach LaVine, who's getting up there in age a bit, who has declined over the last couple of years, and is on a decent-sized contract, is solid. I think they sold high, and I like the fact that they were able to get a first-round pick in return rather than having to attach a first-round pick to get rid of Zach LaVine, which seems like something they may have to do may have had to do if they traded Zach LaVine in the past over the last couple of years. So this seems like a really solid deal for all three teams involved here. Let's see, another trade I wanted to talk about, and this isn't even like that big of a trade, but this is a trade between the Mavericks and the 76ers, in which the Mavs received Caleb Martin and the 76ers received Quentin Grimes and a 2025 second-round pick. My goodness, Nico Harrison, you are such a fool. This is a really bad trade. This is so bad. The Mavericks followed up the Luka Doncic trade with another terrible trade. And of course, this trade isn't near the magnitude of the Luka trade, but this is still really bad. The Mavs gave up a player who is younger, better, and cheaper than Caleb Martin, and also gave up a second-round pick just to get Caleb Martin. Like, that is a terrible deal. Trades like this are what make Daryl Morey a good GM. Like, this is a terrible trade for the Mavericks. I don't understand it whatsoever. I think it is horrific. And these little moves like this are what separate the good front offices from the bad ones, and the good GMs from the bad ones. So I thought this trade was horrendous, and a lot of people were complaining about it on social media as well, so I am not the only person that feels this way. I hated that trade. Another trade that went down, I'm not going to talk about this too much because I don't really have much in-depth analysis on it, but the Kings, they got Jonas Valanciunas from the Wizards, and the Wizards received Cities Sissoko and 2 future second-round picks. Seemed like a nice trade for the Kings off the top of my head. I know Jonas Valanciunas is older, but seemed like a decent trade for the Kings. Let's see, what is another good trade to look at? Okay, here we go. I switched over to a Yahoo Sports article, which has all of the trades updated. Another trade, and this was wild. This was between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Washington Wizards. The Bucks got Kyle Kuzma, Patrick Baldwin Jr., Jericho Sims, and a second-round pick. And the Wizards got Chris Middleton, A.J. Johnson, and a 2028 first-round pick swap. I hate this trade so much for the Bucks. It seems like this is a move that they're making in order to get under the second apron, but God, just in terms of the value of all the pieces involved, I think this is terrible. Kyle Kuzma is in the middle of a historically terrible season, respectfully. And he's been awful this year, and they're giving up Chris Middleton, a veteran who has been a part of this team for forever, and this is all they're getting. And the Bucks had to give up a pick swap like this. Oh my gosh! Oh, this is bad for the Bucks. I think the Bucks front office had a really bad trade deadline, and this was a very questionable move in my opinion. I think this makes the Bucks worse, and I think this makes it more likely that Giannis Antetokounmpo will request or demand a trade in the near future. This trade makes no sense to me. I love this for the Wizards. Middleton gives them a veteran presence in the locker room. Middleton's a better player than Kyle Kuzma. Of course, that doesn't matter that much for the Wizards because they're not trying to compete right now. But I think the veteran leadership that Chris Middleton will provide will be valuable, and getting the pick swap is big as well. So I think the Wizards did a nice job here. I like this a lot for them. And for the Bucks, I think this trade is terrible, even if it gets them under the second apron. I just don't really see the vision for them. Don't like this whatsoever for the Bucks. Now we have another huge trade between the Warriors, the Heat, and the Pistons. Jimmy Butler finds a new home. The Warriors get Jimmy Butler. The Heat get Andrew Wiggins, PJ Tucker, Kyle Anderson, and a protected first-round pick. And the Pistons get Lindy Waters III, Dennis Schroeder, Josh Richardson, and a second-round pick. I like this for the Warriors. They get a very good player in Jimmy Butler. Jimmy is not the same player that he was a few years ago. He has declined a bit, especially on defense. But he's still a very nice interior scorer. He can provide some playmaking. He won't space the floor or defend at a high level, but he still is a top 50 player, probably a top 40 player. And so I like that the Warriors were able to get him. They're trying to compete a little bit with Stephen Curry, reaching the end of his career. And so they're trying to be as competitive as possible before Curry decides to retire or potentially ask out of Golden State. And so I get why the Warriors made a move like this. And I think the Heat got a decent amount for Jimmy Butler, a guy who didn't want to be there, who was adamant that he was not going to stay in Miami, and they were still able to get a first-round pick and a group of players. Getting a first-round pick in return for Jimmy Butler was big for the Heat. So I really like this return for them. Andrew Wiggins, not a great player. He did have a nice season a couple of years ago, but he's not the same player that he was when the Warriors won the title. But I think the first-round pick is the prize for the Heat in this trade. And then the Pistons, they get a couple of players. Dennis Schroeder is actually, he actually got moved to the Pistons today, I believe. They get him, they get a second-round pick, Josh Richardson. They get a group of players and a second-round pick. So they get a couple of pieces, nothing too big for them. The main part of this trade is Jimmy Butler being moved to the Warriors and the Heat getting a first-round pick in return for their disgruntled star. I don't love this for the Warriors. I don't love their vision right now. They're trying to be competitive, and I'm not sure that that's the best move for them. Looking forward, looking into the future, but they're trying to be competitive, and I think this move will help them do that. I'm not sure what their ceiling is with their roster in the state that it's in right now, but we'll see what they're able to do in the postseason. Let's see. Next up, we got another big trade. This includes Brandon Ingram finally being sent out of New Orleans. In this trade between the Raptors and the Pelicans, the Raptors get Brandon Ingram. The New Orleans Pelicans get Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. For the Raptors, I don't love this trade. Brandon Ingram is a solid player, but not a great one. He's a guy that I think some people overrate. I think generally he's properly rated, but some people do overrate him a decent amount. I think he is kind of a hard player to find a good fit for in the NBA because he isn't a great shooter, and I think that hurts him a little bit. He also isn't a great defender, and so he's not a great off-ball player, but he also shouldn't be a high-usage on-ball creator. And so players like that are really hard to build around and are really hard to find a good fit for. And I'm just not sure that Brandon Ingram was worth trading some draft capital and multiple players for when he was probably not going to stay with the Pelicans in free agency and would have been a free agent more than likely. So I'm just not sure this was, a good value trade for the Raptors. They did get the best player in the deal, so shout out to them for that. But yeah, I'm just not sure I would have been that interested in giving up multiple picks and multiple players for Ingram. Not sure I would have been interested in doing that. And for the Pelicans, I think that they got a solid return for a guy that wasn't going to be in New Orleans long term. So I like that for them. I'm kind of surprised that another team didn't outbid the Raptors here. Because I think that I assume that there would have been at least one team who may have been interested in giving up multiple first-round picks for Brandon Ingram, which to me would have been crazy, but you just never know how the league values players. And I thought that Brandon Ingram would have been the type of player that the league is higher on than fans and analysts. So I thought when I saw this return, I was like, wow, I don't know if I would have given that up, but I'm surprised that at least one team in the NBA didn't try to beat out this offer. This is a really interesting trade. I'm not really sure I get what the vision is for the Raptors moving forward. And I'm not saying that regarding this trade, but just the way that they've been handling their roster over the last year or two. I just don't know what the future holds for the Raptors and what the team's plan is for the future. I'm interested in seeing what they do moving forward because I just don't see the vision. I don't know what they're trying to do. Are they trying to be competitive? Are they trying to rebuild? I don't think they're trying to rebuild, and I think it's obvious with a move like this. But the moves they're making, I just don't think will make them a seriously competitive team anytime soon. So that's something that I'm interested in regarding the Toronto Raptors. And then after this, we've got another big trade, which actually went down right after the Brandon Ingram trade, and this is between the Lakers and the Hornets. The Lakers, they get Mark Williams. The Hornets get Dalton Connect, Cam Reddish, a 2031 unprotected first-round pick, and a 2030 pick swap. The Lakers, they finally get a center, and the Hornets, they get a nice haul in return for their young, productive center, Mark Williams. For the Lakers, I get why they were interested in Mark Williams. I do not love what they gave up for him. Mark Williams is a really talented offensive player. He's just straight up a good offensive player. He can finish at the rim. He's a good lob threat. He has some shooting potential. He is a solid passer. And all of that makes him really exciting on that end of the floor. And his offensive impact metrics are really good. But his defense sucks. and he's also injury prone. And his health is a major concern, a huge concern. And so the fact that the Lakers gave up not only Dalton Connect, who they drafted this year, but also a unprotected first round pick in 2031 and a pick swap is insane. Cam Reddish is also included in this deal, but like, who cares? He's a very small part of this trade. I don't think he's going to be a big piece for the Hornets. I think this is a great trade for the Hornets. They sell high on Mark Williams, get a first round, an unprotected first a few years from now, as well as a pick swap, and they get a rookie in Dalton Connect, who I think is overrated by like Lakers fans, but he does provide a lot of value as a shooter. He didn't really provide much value elsewhere, but man, I thought this was a really nice trade for the Hornets. I like what they did here. I get why the Lakers are intrigued by Mark Williams, but I thought they way overpaid for Williams. But we'll see how Williams plays in Los Angeles. Hopefully, he can improve as a defender, and his health isn't a major issue moving forward, but those are big ifs. Let's go ahead and look and see if there are any other major trades I want to talk about, and there are. There are two trades I want to talk about, including the Atlanta Hawks. I'm going to talk about these first because I am a Hawks fan myself, but I also think it's just really interesting to talk about what the vision is for the Hawks front office and what they're trying to do with the team. So the first trade they made is sending DeAndre Hunter to the Cavs. So the Cavs, they get DeAndre Hunter. In return, the Hawks get Karis LeVert, Georges Niang. I think that's how you say his first name. The Hawks also get 3 second-round picks and 2 pick swaps. This trade is really interesting. I'm glad the Hawks decided to trade Hunter when his value is at its highest, because I think Hunter is a very inconsistent player year to year. There's been a lot of volatility in his performance up to this point in his career, and so I'm glad the Hawks finally decided to trade him. I'm just really surprised that we weren't able to get at least 1 first-round pick. We didn't get pick swaps, but based on what I know about pick swaps, I'm not sure those are going to really matter. So that stinks. And Karis LeVert is a solid player, and I love the fact that we got 3 second-round picks, but I really wanted a first-round pick in return for DeAndre Hunter, and I really like the aggressiveness from the Cavs here. Hunter is having a very solid season. He's had probably the best season of his career, I'd say. He is a strong candidate to win the Sixth Man of the Year award. He's having a good year as a shooter and a scorer in general. He's been really good this year. I think he provides some offensive juice from the wing position that the Cavs have been missing. I think he will be a great supporting piece around Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Evan Mobley. And I think he will fit really nicely for the Cavs, and I think he will help them as they try to make a deep playoff run this year. I like this trade for the Cavs. The fact that they didn't have to give up a first-round pick is big, and yeah, they did have to give up, some draft capital and Karis LeVert. So it's not like they gave up nothing. But I thought that Hunter might return more to the Hawks in a trade. So I don't hate this trade for the Hawks. I thought they would get a little bit more, but I do really like this for the Cavs, and I think this is a very aggressive move, and I like that the Cavs were aggressive here. Another trade that the Hawks made included the Clippers, and this sent Bogdan Bogdanovic out of Atlanta. The Clippers get Bogey as well as 3 second-round picks, and the Hawks get Terrence Mann and Bones Highland. It sounds like this move helped the Hawks out from a cap space perspective or a luxury tax perspective. I don't love trading the 3 second-round picks on top of Bogey. However, Bogey is having a really, really rough season. He's been terrible this year. He's also older. He's 32 years old, has knees made of glass. So I think that the return the Hawks got in terms of players is really nice. I think these players are better than Bogey, or at least for the season. I do, like I said a second ago, I hate that we're trading the second round picks, but I think the players we got in return for Bogey are solid. And in terms of value, this is probably a better value trade for the Hawks than the DeAndre Hunter trade. So I don't really have many complaints about this deal, but overall, I just don't see the vision for this Hawks team. Like, these are moves that we're making which signal that we're kind of tanking a bit. Yet, we don't have our own first round pick. So, tanking doesn't help us right now. And if we are going to tank, why not trade Trae Young? Why aren't we trading Clint Capella? Like, I don't get how Capella has survived in Atlanta over the last couple of years. Maybe teams just aren't that interested in him, but God, I mean, I cannot believe that he is on our roster right now. That is insane to me. And as a Hawks fan, I wouldn't mind trading Trae Young. I love Trae. I think Trae is a very talented offensive player. And he has done so much for the Hawks. But he wants to go somewhere where he can compete. I get that. And the Hawks, they are not at a point where they can be competitive. Like, the roster is mediocre. They really need to commit to a rebuild. And Trae Young doesn't fit with that timeline. And they can get a lot of value out of trading Trae Young. They can get draft capital. They may even be able to get a solid player in return. But I think trading Trae Young is something the Hawks need to seriously consider right now. I don't get why what the Hawks' vision is. Like, these moves that they made at the trade deadline signal that they're tanking, yet they will never commit to a full rebuild, it seems. And it's so frustrating. I love Trae Young, but if I were the Hawks GM, I would probably look into moving him and trying to get draft capital in return for my young star. And I would just do it for Trae because he wants to win. He wants to compete. And I don't think he can do that in Atlanta. As a Hawks fan, I'm frustrated by what our team is doing, and I don't see the vision, which really, really sucks. Let's see. It looks like there's only one more trade that I want to talk about before I end the podcast. And this was a trade that happened at the last second. This includes the Wizards, the Grizzlies, and the Kings. The Wizards get Marcus Smart, a 2025 first-round pick, Colby Jones, and Alex Len. And the Grizzlies get Marvin Bagley III, Johnny Davis, 2 second-round picks, and a 2028 second-round pick. And the Kings get Jake LaRavia. Now, I don't know where this first-round pick is coming from. I don't know which team gave that up. But, I kind of like this for the Wizards. They get a pick. They are taking on Marcus Smart's contract. But, they get a pick here, which is not bad at all. The Grizzlies, let me see if I can find out where this pick is coming from. Because that would actually help me out a lot, in terms of, figuring out what I actually think about this trade. So we're doing this live. Let's go, Shams. You got to have information about this trade, right? You've got to. Come on now. So it looks like this first-round pick is from the Grizzlies. So the Grizzlies traded a first to the Wizards. I don't really get that for the Grizzlies here. I guess they're attaching a first to Marcus Smart just to get off his contract, which, okay, why? I feel like there has to be more to this deal, because I'm not really understanding this move from the Grizzlies' perspective. Marvin Bagley III and Johnny Davis are, those guys are not meaningful players. They're not going to really do much for this team. And the Grizzlies only got 3 second-round picks. weird move for them. I'm not sure I see the vision here for the Grizzlies. And the Kings, they get a guy who, in Jake LaRavia, who hasn't really done much in the NBA, but coming out, he was like a analytical darling in the NBA draft. So I'm not surprised that a very progressive, and analytically driven team like the Kings, was interested in LaRavia. I don't really have that many thoughts about this deal, but I think this is a really weird move for the Grizzlies to make. Of course, I am not familiar with their cap situation or their luxury tax situation, so maybe this has something to do with that. And if so, and that would make this make a bit more sense. But from what I know at the moment, this is a really confusing move, and I'm not sure that it makes a ton of sense. But those are my thoughts on this year's NBA trade deadline and some of the moves that were made. I didn't go through every single individual trade. Some trades are just really small and not worth discussing a whole lot. But like I said earlier, this year's NBA trade deadline was absolutely incredible. I enjoyed it a lot. There were some blockbuster deals. There was a ton of activity, and I thought it was absolutely incredible. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on any of these trades on social media. You can reach out to me on Twitter. That's where I'm active the most, at the Ryan McCrary. That's the RyanMCCRARY. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on any platform where you listen to podcasts, like Spotify or Apple Podcast, please leave a 5-star review. That would help me out a lot. I would really, really appreciate that. But that's it for today's episode. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and I will see y'all next time. Peace.